I'm really happy to have my daughter, Danielle D'Souza Gill, in studio. And you might be checking out our new setup here, which I think is pretty cool. And of course, Dee's visit is timely in a political sense because the Supreme Court is taking up a big abortion decision. Danielle, by the way, is the author of this book, which kind of matches my shirt, The Choice, The Abortion Divide in America. Really a book that breaks a lot of new ground on this issue and thinks about it both in a very fundamental way, but also in a very timely way. Dee, welcome to the podcast. This is cool.
Thank you.
I'm going to read you a line from Bloomberg. This is a little bit of, tells you how the media gets at these issues. The Supreme Court will consider gutting the constitutional right to abortion. And then below, Supreme Court agrees to hear a case that may slash abortion rights. I'm really struck by those words gutting and slash. I mean, the very language of the abortion procedure itself. It's kind of like, in 1945, U.S. government is trying to exterminate the concentration camps. The concentration camps are themselves engines of extermination. So Talk about this Mississippi law. What does it say? What is the case the Supreme Court has agreed to take up?
The Mississippi law states that the state can regulate abortions after 15 weeks. However, they do allow for cases of either fetal abnormality, or life of the mother medical emergencies. But other than that, after the 15 weeks, they're not allowing abortions to be performed. And so the Supreme Court has agreed to look at that case.
Okay, so in other words, the Mississippi case would allow abortions prior to 15 weeks, pretty much as they are now. But after 15 weeks, essentially a ban, not just regulation, but essentially a ban except for those conditions. So a pretty tough law. Now, I'm assuming that the reason that the Supreme Court is taking this up is because they are willing to reconsider the kind of unlimited right to abortion for essentially the full 9 weeks. They wouldn't need to take 9 months. They wouldn't need to take up the case if they were just happy with the way. So the left is very jittery about this. How are you feeling about why the court might have taken this case?
I think it shows that the court is looking for some kind of middle ground between this 9-month abortion with really no regulation versus Texas, which is trying to pass the heartbeat bill. So I think they maybe took this 15-week case because they maybe want something that falls in the second trimester like this. I'm skeptical of whether the court would come down hard on Roe v. Wade in one blow just because of some of their previous actions with the election and things like that. So I think they would be a little scared to do that. So maybe this case reflects more of the middle ground they're looking for.
I want to circle back to what the court may or may not do and its implications, but it is worth pointing out that the U.S. abortion laws now are the most permissive in the Western world. In fact, they're among the most permissive in the world. They are comparable to laws in countries like Russia and China, if you look at European countries, and I was actually looking at a kind of a pro-abortion site just to see what they say about them, and they say a number of European countries regulate abortion between 18 and 24 weeks. They might allow it after that, but you have to show that the woman's health or life is at risk. Laws in 12 European countries require women to undergo mandatory counseling. And this is not just, countries like Armenia or Georgia. Belgium is in there, Germany, Hungary, the Netherlands. For adolescents, third-party authorization. A number of countries in Europe require permission from parents and guardians for adolescent girls to get an abortion. A number of European countries allow medical professionals to refuse to perform abortions on grounds of conscience. They don't force them to do it. And some of them have specific criminal sanctions for abortions that are performed outside the scope of these applicable legal procedures. So the point to make is that all of this would have been, in a Roe era, struck down. So the extremism of the American law and the extremism, I think I'd have to say, of the Democratic Party's position is really striking. Talk about the way in which the the Democrats have gone from, you may say, pro-choice to pro-abortion?
They used to be pro-choice. They used to talk about how everyone has the right to make their own choices, and they really liked using the language of choice. But now they really are pro-abortion. And even if you look at the language that Planned Parenthood uses, it celebrates abortion. It has they have holidays called Celebrating Your Abortion Provider, things like that. And I think that the left will see any kind of rollback of Roe v. Wade, any kind of limitation, as something really outrageous. So they really don't want any restrictions whatsoever. And of course, we've seen Governor Northam in Virginia talk about even after a baby is born, what would happen to it. So even for them, the 9-month point and after birth is something that they celebrate. They want to continue those abortions and infanticide.
Not to mention that if they could, they would probably also overturn the Hyde Amendment. And the Hyde Amendment restricts federal funds going toward abortion. But these people seem to believe that if you want an abortion and you can't pay for it, the taxpayer can be forced to pay, right? So they would actually take this so-called right and provide a subsidy for it. Whereas if you think about our other rights, our First Amendment right to free speech or to religion, Second Amendment right to own a gun, those don't come with federal subsidy. The government doesn't provide me with a newspaper. They don't buy me an automatic weapon. I got to put out my own cash to do it. But in this case, it's almost like they're elevating abortion into a super right.
Exactly. And even Biden, who's supposedly a moderate, who's supposedly Catholic, as he says, he's in favor of overturning the Hyde Amendment. And so is Harris. So they want to force every American, even who has conscience objections, to pay for abortion.
Now, you mentioned the two, not extremes, but the two sort of bookends of the debate. On the one hand, permissive abortion, abortion for any reason, federal subsidy for abortion. On the other side, the heartbeat bill. What does you mentioned the Texas heartbeat bill. What do these heartbeat bills do?
The heartbeat bill passed in Texas, I think, is really a signal to say, hey, this is actually what we believe. We believe that when the heartbeat is beating in this child on its own without even pumping the mother's blood, it's not her heartbeat, it's the child's heartbeat, that this is obviously a life. This is obviously a human being. And so the court hasn't chosen to take that case, but I think it does signal where the American people fall on this issue.
And when does the heart start beating?
It starts beating anywhere from 5 weeks to 10 weeks in.
So that is it's not
Maybe
the moment.
Even earlier with earlier detection. I mean, a couple weeks in.
Interesting. So it's not the moment of conception, but in some cases what you're saying is even before the woman may know that she's pregnant, she's conceived with the man, a new human being with a beating heart.
Exactly. And just as technology has improved, we've been able to detect the heartbeat earlier and earlier. So right now they can detect it a couple weeks in, but it could end up being earlier.
When we come back, we're going to dive into this some more and talk about the court, what's happening on the court, what we can expect out of the court, and the implications.